So on the front suspension, originally it had a coil spring with a shock that ran down through the center of it. To replace that, what I did is I removed the stock assembly completely, kept the existing control arms, used a piece of 3/8 plate, and then I bought two of the Slam Specialties 6-inch bags, and that's what I have, one on each side. They're more than enough for what I need for weight and things like that. I also made sure to put a bump stop on it. So that's what this little chunk is down there. So when the car is slammed all the way down, this comes up against the underside of the frame. And then in the opposite direction, it has the factory bump stop here. So the upper control arm comes down on top of that bump stop. So bags are great, but they really don't like being overstretched or crushed all the way down typically. So that's what that looks like. And then on the top of the bag, up where the coil used to mount, a bag needs a flat plate and a coil only needs right kind of the perimeter. So I made a flat plate that fit all the way around there. It's drilled for the bolt holes to hold the bag in place, and also has a spot to let the airline come down through. And then I welded that, seal welded that around the perimeter of it. I did have to radius inside the kind of where the coil went, because the bag is a little bit bigger, and obviously you don't want the bag rubbing up against anything because it'll pop. Otherwise, for front suspension, it worked out pretty easily for me because the stock steering didn't need any modifications. I talked about it in the other video, but I put the Wilwood disc brake kit on it and then plumbed the brake line back up and through. And let's take a look at the front. And up on the front side, I made its own video, but I made some new mounts for a shock and also for the sway bar, just by kind of making a bracket that comes off of the bolt that holds the main plate onto the control arm, and then levering it forward. So bear in mind, this is at its worst case position, so this will get a lot better once I get the right length of bolt and can actually tighten it in there properly. But yeah, that's kind of what the front looks like. So to make the air ride kit work on the rear suspension, I mounted a spacer that I had fabricated out of 2 pieces of plate and some vertical bracing back up into the frame where the original coil mounted. Then I mounted the bag to the lower portion of this spacer, and then the bottom of the bag mounted directly to the differential on the where the original coils would have mounted. So all in all, I needed the spacer to help make up the additional height difference between the original coil and the height of the bag that I'm putting in there. Also of note is I put limiting straps on this back suspension as well. And I put a minimal bump stop on them as well, so whether the bag is at full extension or compressed all the way, it's not riding on the bag, same as the front suspension. So I guess this is the heart of the air suspension system. So I got a Via Air compressor. It came part of the kit that I bought. It has like a pre-made pigtail that I brought over. I put a T right about here. And then this is something that didn't come in the kit that I felt was absolutely needed, that they should add in future rounds, but it's a pressure switch. So it will kick on the compressor once it drops below a certain PSI, and then kick it off once it reaches the desired PSI. So in the stock system, or the system as they sent it to me, the compressor would just run and run and run until you physically turned it off. There was no on-off kind of functionality built in other than a thermal overload on the compressor, which isn't great. I also, I guess, mounted it on this wooden deck. That helped me modularize it so that I could bring it in and out a little bit easier. And I put rubber isolators underneath, and I think that really helps with the noise and the vibration. Turning over here. So from there, from the compressor, it comes across into the pressure tank. It's a 200 psi rated tank. It's a smaller volume, but I don't plan on doing a bunch of up and down, so it'll probably be okay. And from the tank, it comes over to the kind of the Slam Specialties manifold over here. So that's air controlled, and it's 4-way, meaning that all 4 corners have independent control on them, and I'll show you that when I get to the controller. I guess there's one other thing. There's a condensation drain at the bottom, which is important, because most of these systems you'll make quite a bit of condensation as you're running air through, and it condenses it when it pressurizes it, just coming in from the atmosphere. And then Last but not least, something I did a little bit different is another thing that the system didn't have. Another thing the system didn't have was a gauge. Nothing would tell you the actual pressure that the system's running at. So that's what that gauge is. I put in a 200 psi gauge. You can see I'm holding at about 125 right now. And then also I put in a fill on the bottom. So it's hard to see it on there, but it's an airline fitting right about there with a valve on it. So if I wanted to drain the system completely, I could just hook up my compressor to it afterwards and use the air compressor from the house to bring it up to easily 100, 125 psi, close the valve, and then use the onboard compressor to kind of do the top off. So that really helps me, I think, save some of the life of the compressor, so it's not running and running and running, trying to build it up every time that I have to drain all the air for various reasons. For the controller itself, it's got quite a few different functions. So the 4 corner buttons control each independent bag. So I've kind of written on mine. So this is all the front. So that's front driver, front passenger, up and down. This is both front bags up, both front bags down. Same thing mirrored here for the rear, driver, passenger, up and down, rear, up and down. And then down here is all 4 bags down or up. So it doesn't have preset heights, but I found this works pretty well for me to set the heights of everything I need. So this is the car at full height, as high as I can get it. It's about 8 inches of clearance to the lowest spot. So a fair bit of room. So I'm going to do a couple of close-ups of the front suspension and rear suspension as it kind of goes through its motion here.